GOP nominee Donald Trump fights back against accusations of assault. And a WikiLeaks email dump reveals anti-Catholic bias among some of Hillary Clinton's top campaign staff. Here with analysis is former Republican National Committee Chairman Michael STEELE. And later, a voter's guide to the moral issues of the election season. Archbishop Joseph NAUMANN of Kansas City joins us to offer his requirements for responsible citizenship the world over. Begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Michael STEELE and Archbishop Joseph NAUMANN are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, or if you have a question, I'll be live tweeting throughout. You can find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me at worldover@ewtn.com. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. A little more than 3 weeks to the election, the race for president is as fluid as ever. The latest polls indicate that Donald Trump's strong debate performance against Hillary Clinton on Sunday has helped him recover from the release of a 2005 video where Trump made lewd comments about women. Of the polls released Thursday, a Rasmussen poll shows Trump in the lead. Another shows a tie, and still others show Clinton with a 5 to 9 point advantage. In the meantime, both campaigns are busily swatting down the latest controversies. Trump is emphatically denying media reports from 4 different women, alleging that he inappropriately touched or kissed them. The New York Times and the Palm Beach Post on Wednesday reported stories of 3 women making allegations. Separately, a People magazine reporter wrote a first-hand account of being attacked by Trump while interviewing he and his wife Melania. Trump denounced the Times story as a total fabrication and asserted that the incident cited in People did not happen. His campaign has threatened to sue. More later in the show. And there are also troubles at the Clinton campaign. The most recent batch of documents released by the watchdog group WikiLeaks is creating headaches for Hillary Clinton. Emails appear to show top members of her campaign mocking Catholics and evangelical Christians. Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and communications director Jennifer Palmieri are central to the email dump. In one email, Catholicism is derided for its, quote, severely backward gender relations. Podesta, a Catholic, would not confirm the authenticity of the emails and said he didn't recognize the communication. Another 2011 email from Sandy Newman of Voices for Progress to Podesta called for a Catholic spring in which, quote, Catholics themselves demand and end the Middle Ages dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church, end quote. Podesta indicated that a subversive movement was already in place via 2 groups condemned by some bishops, Catholics United and Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. GOP nominee Donald Trump was quick to weigh in, and Catholic League President Bill Donahue is calling for the Clinton campaign to fire Podesta for attempting to manipulate public opinion within the Catholic Church. Also, part of the latest round of WikiLeaks documents, allegations of corruption involving the Clinton Foundation and Haitian earthquake relief in 2010. According to multiple reports, top foundation and State Department officials may have given financial priority to contractors working in Haiti with close ties to the Clinton Foundation. Bernard Sansorique, former president of the Haitian Senate, now a U.S. citizen, blasted the Clintons, accusing Hillary Clinton of abusing her position as Secretary of State and prioritizing access to what the State Department viewed as a gold rush for her wealthy donor. He alleged that the Clintons stole billions of dollars from the sick and dying. And in a follow-up to a story we covered last month, a coalition of religious and civic leaders have denounced a report by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which said religious liberties significantly infringe on civil rights. It claimed that many use the pretext of religious doctrines to discriminate. Dr. Tom Farr, director of the Religious Freedom Project at Georgetown, said the country's founders would be scandalized by the assertion. Signers included Farr, Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, chair of the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Religious Liberty, and leaders from evangelical, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, and Mormon communities. There were also a few secular leaders thrown in for good measure. And he is the first American to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in more than a decade, and the first musician. Nobel laureates for literature include George Bernard Shaw, Hemingway, Mauriac, Eugene O'Neill, playwrights and novelists. But this year, Bob Dylan, best known for The Times Are Changing and Blowing in the Wind, has been awarded the Nobel Prize. While some are celebrating the break with tradition, at least one Scottish novelist was not impressed. This is an ill-conceived nostalgia award for senile, gibbering hippies, according to Irvine Welsh. He's the author of Trainspotting. Personally, if they wanted to honor lyricists, what about Stephen Sondheim or the Bergmans, Oscar Hammerstein, Irving Berlin? The times have changed. And finally, I got such a fun video this week, I had to share it with you. Lucas sent this in after reading Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls. Look at this.
It is a very, very great book. I love it. Very great and adventurous. And I cannot wait for part 2 to come out because it is just a very great book. Thank you.
Lucas, fear not. Will Wilder, The Lost Staff of Wonders, book 2 in the series, is coming on March 7th. You can pre-order now. In the meantime, it's not too early to start your Christmas shopping. The first Will Wilder book is available from the EWTN catalog, online, and at bookstores everywhere. When we return, what's the real impact of the Donald Trump video controversy? And what about those Clinton campaign emails disparaging Catholics? Former RNC Chairman Michael STEELE is here with his take when the world over continues. Stay right there.
Of why this election matters, why it should matter for all people of conscience in this country. There is so much at stake in this election.
Their financial resources are virtually unlimited. Their political resources are unlimited. Their media resources are unmatched. And most importantly, the depths of their immorality is absolutely unlimited.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was First Lady Michelle Obama and Donald Trump, both invoking morality this week. Trump has been engulfed in a controversy surrounding lewd comments made 10 years ago and a succession of accusers who have come forward in the last few days. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, has her own share of difficulties. WikiLeaks email dumps reveal media manipulation in her campaign and a healthy dose of anti-Catholicism among her lieutenants. Here to analyze it all is former Republican National Committee Chairman and current political analyst for MSNBC, Michael STEELE.
Good to be back in the house, man.
Always good to have you in the house.
Thank you.
I want to start with Michelle Obama capitalizing on the Trump videotape and the scandals that have surrounded it. Watch.
I know it's a campaign, but this isn't about politics. It's about basic human decency. It's about right and wrong. And we simply cannot endure this or expose our children to this any longer. But if we have a president who routinely degrades women, who brags about sexually assaulting women, then how can we maintain our moral authority in the world?
Does this work? Do you think women are listening to this and heeding this?
I think they are. I think, the problem with these current revelations, unlike what we've seen in the past, these are actually the candidates saying the words. So the impact is a lot different as opposed to, I heard someone say, Donald said this.
Right.
Now you're actually hearing him saying it. So you can then, what Michelle Obama's doing, juxtapose a moral authority, if you will, saying, how dare you with your nose in the air. But the reality of it is, it doesn't translate politically necessarily. People may agree with the moral outrage, but this election has never been about that. Because if it were, Donald Trump probably wouldn't have been the nominee, given some of the things he's already said and done over the last 15 or so months. So there's something else at work.
It's not like he was a choir boy during the
exactly.
primary and saying, "Oh, I love you, little Marco. I love you, Lion Ted."
Right.
I mean, he was affixing,
That's it.
play yard
this
names
is something
to these
else.
guys.
This is something else. But this works for the Obamas. This works to sort of take that sort of high tone with someone like Donald Trump. And you can hear it when they say the things that they say about, how outraged and how beneath all of us this really is.
You see, my problem with it isn't that people shouldn't be shocked or appalled by the comments.
Right.
They should and they are.
Yes.
However, we are in a culture, and, not to disparage the First Lady, but, the First Lady's in the front row of the Beyonce concerts when she's, doing what she does.
Exactly.
I don't have to paint the picture. You've seen the Super Bowl. We've got a country that has bought 50 million copies of 50 Shades of Grey. They don't exactly refer to women as, treasured commodities or
that's the
something
part
to be revered there.
That's the part of this that I find a little bit disingenuous, because they talk about Mr. Trump in the context of objectifying women, and yet everything in our culture does exactly that.
Precisely.
In so many different ways. So, I get it. The stuff that you like that objectifies women is okay, 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
But when he says, does locker room talk, in a private conversation with someone just happened to be mic'd up for, then you have moral outrage. And I think that's where a lot of people, particularly a lot of Trump supporters, are sitting there scratching their head going, what?
Yeah, well, moral outrage is good as long as it applies to everyone.
Everybody, exactly.
Let's go to this. This is a rally in Florida on Thursday. Trump went full frontal against these attacks. Watch.
These vicious claims about me of inappropriate conduct with women are totally and absolutely false. And the Clintons know it, and they know it very well. These claims are all fabricated. They're pure fiction, and they're outright lies. These events never, ever happened.
He went on to say that there's collusion here between the media and the Clinton campaign, and this is all coordinated. Does this work?
It does work for his base support. It does finish out or sort of follows a narrative that you hear inside the GOP about the press writ large, how biased they are, and how much they selectively choose what stories to air or what stories to reveal, and how they do that. But here's the problem. When Donald Trump makes a statement like that, it then invites more investigation. It then invites others to go, oh, really? Well, let's go to the videotape.
Right. Well, it's just like the Anderson Cooper setup line.
Exactly.
Have you ever done that? But have you ever acted on those words?
Right.
And
exactly.
I say, oh, watch.
Here we go. Here we go. So that's the problem. And again, I expect that there will be more. There will be more off-mic moments. There will be more people coming forth and saying this or that thing happened. All that really does is further polarizes the electorate, because there is a growing chorus of folks out there who believe that all of this, as you made clear, is part of an ongoing setup. This is all part of what the Clinton machine, coupled with a biased media, is all a part of what they're planning to do.
Now, there's another turn in this strategy that I found interesting, because Trump is trying to cast himself as the ultimate outsider.
Yes.
He started tweeting on Tuesday regarding party loyalty. Here's what he said: disloyal R's, Republicans, are far more difficult than crooked Hillary. They come at you from the sides. They don't know how to win. I will teach them. Then he spoke out at a rally against Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Watch.
Instead of calling me and saying, congratulations, you did a great job. You absolutely destroyed her in the debate, like everybody said. Wouldn't you think that Paul Ryan would call and say, good going? You'd think that they'd say, great going, Don. Let's go. Let's beat this crook. She's a crook. Let's beat her. We got to stop it. No, he doesn't do that.
Now, does this work? I mean, he's clearly using all of this to say, look, I'm not like them.
Right.
Does he need the establishment? Does he need support?
Actually, he's shown that he doesn't, which has been one of the great frustration for many of the folks in Washington. This has been one of the campaigns that I'm telling you will be studied and examined for generations to see and understand exactly what he did. He came in through the Republican door and then just blew the place up and went out the back door, right? and everybody's sitting there going, what happened?
Right.
And the reality of it is he's taken politics, and what he's done is he's brought reality television into it. So a lot of his language is the language of those folks who watch reality TV. Everyday Joes and Janes out there who, when they get off from work, settle back and watch, Housewives of Atlanta or whatever show happens to be on.
Now, in fairness to Trump, he's reacting to Paul Ryan, who said, look, I'm not going to defend him. I'm not going to go appear with him.
Right.
And he told his caucus, you're on your own. You can say what you want against Trump or support him.
But
There's
here's
no
the problem for
party
Paul
line.
Ryan. Paul Ryan should have completed the sentence at that point and said, and I withdraw my endorsement.
But he didn't.
But he didn't do that. And so that again gave Trump more of a hammer to use, because now it looks like, okay, so you're going to be with me when you want to be with me and against me when everybody else says you shouldn't be. And that furthers that narrative, that anti-establishment narrative that Donald Trump has been expert at.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this plays.
Oh, my gosh.
I know it consolidates the base. Does this appeal to people beyond the base, being the ultimate outsider? I'm not owned by the Democrats or the Republicans.
That's a good question, Raymond, because politics is all about addition, not subtraction. And that's true for Hillary, and it's true for Donald Trump. Hillary, her addition is getting that Obama coalition to come back and to stay with her. And as we've seen, she's having a problem with African Americans. She's at 72, 73% of that vote. She's having a problem with women. 44% of white educated women in recent polls say they're firmly for Hillary. So she's having a problem with her addition. Donald Trump clearly has a math problem, not just with the blue wall that exists out there in the Electoral College, making it more advantageous for Democrats than Republicans to win the White House. But he also has the problem with various constituencies, whether it's African Americans, Hispanics especially, where his numbers aren't strong.
I want to go to what Catholics is the big news of the week, and that's these WikiLeaks emails that have been dribbling out. Most of them are coming from John Podesta. Now, he is head of the Clinton campaign, chairman of the Clinton campaign. Now, it was discovered that Clinton's communications director, Jennifer Palmieri, and a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, John Halpin, exchanged emails that mocked Catholicism. Here are a bit of their exchanges. John Halpin writes, "It's an amazing bastardization of the faith. They must be attracted to the systematic thought and severely backwards gender relations and must be totally unaware of Christian democracy." Jennifer Palmieri responds, and they're talking about Rupert Murdoch, the chairman of News Corp. "I imagine they think that it is the most socially acceptable, politically conservative religion. Their rich friends wouldn't understand if they became evangelicals." Halpin responds, "Excellent point. They can throw around Thomistic thought and subsidiarity and sound sophisticated because no one knows what the hell they're talking about." This was a commentary on Rupert Murdoch, who's a convert to Catholicism, baptized his children in the Jordan, and they're ridiculing him. What does this tell you about at least the sensibilities of some of the leaders in the Clinton campaign?
It tells me a lot about how in politics constituent groups are taken for granted, and you can be dismissive of them, and yet you will get in front of them and tell them how important they are to you, when the reality is what we just read. Christian democracy, I mean, you're sitting there, you're scratching your head saying, how uppity, how highbrow of you, with your nose looking down on Catholicism, thinking you're smarter than us in so many ways. And I think that attitude is pervasive. And yet you have this, in politics, this sort of veneer that's created to make it feel like, oh, you're part of the team, when you're really not.
Do you buy this argument? Palmieri came out, even Donna Brazil, my pal from New Orleans, came out and said, these are Russian emails. The Russians are doing this. We can't trust anything here. They will neither confirm nor deny these veracity of these emails.
That's just a load, okay? Just the bottom line is, it doesn't matter who hacked the server to get the email. The email is the email. Yeah. All right, and so if you know,
the ink is spilled.
Well, that's right. They're spinning this line that these were tampered with. Why would the Russians create that conversation?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, what are the odds that you even, going to take this particular exchange and say, well, let's throw a little Thomistic theology into this.
We'll call them backward gender relations.
Right. So it makes no sense. But again, it tells you how arrogant they can be in how they look at very constituent groups.
Now, Donald Trump and his running mate Mike Pence jumped on these email revelations from the stump.
The new emails also show members of the Clinton team viciously attacking Catholics and evangelicals. Did you see that? No, the press doesn't want to report that one. That could be election changing. It's just the latest evidence of the hatred that the Clinton campaign has for everyday faithful Americans. If you're a person of faith, I think you're going to vote for Donald Trump.
If only on behalf of her Catholic running mate, Hillary Clinton should denounce those bigoted, anti-Catholic, anti-evangelical remarks, and her campaign staff should apologize to people of faith and do it now.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, I find it amusing because the thing about the Clintons is is trying to project this whole new image about her and her relatability to the world, and yet she goes out and calls half of Donald Trump's supporters, half of a lot of Americans, deplorables, and then and not worthy in many respects. And then you have this by her staff and how they talk about Catholics and evangelicals in a very dismissive way. So it furthers his narrative that these individuals in the Clinton campaign are hostile towards you. They are not respectful of your views. They're not respectful of your faith traditions. They mock your gods and gun. That kind of idea is a very powerful one. Now, if Trump can just step off of his own train of crazy from time to time and stop focusing on the stuff that's distracting his campaign and draw out these comparisons to show exactly from a philosophical perspective as well as a political one the differences between the two candidates, I think he'd be more.
Well, I think the far more devastating batch of emails was the other Podesta exchange with this left-wing activist, where they talk about there needs to be a Catholic spring where seeds of revolution can be planted in the church, and Podesta tells them, don't worry, we've already got these groups. One is Catholics United. The other is, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. But they need new leadership. But they're there. They're in place. I think that's far more destructive, this idea that you have politicos creating organizations to be pods that will explode later within a body of faith to change the teachings and belief of that faith.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm glad you pointed that out because it is one of the more incendiary aspects of the email exchanges, and I'm sure that there will be more that are going to connect to that in some way. And again, for me, the Trump campaign, those out there who are questioning this election and where they're going to stand need to look at this fresh evidence and then weigh it for what it really is. This is about a group of people who are talking about the undermining of a faith tradition in this country, and I cannot think of anything more diabolical than planting seeds like that to spring up later on.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you two quick questions. One, you were the former RNC chairman. You know how this works.
Right.
There is a report in Politico that the Republican National Committee has not spent one dime on ads for Donald Trump this campaign season. Now, they spent $42 million on Mitt Romney, $53 million on John McCain. What is up? What does that tell you?
The problem has been fundraising. A lot of the major donors who made up that $43 and $52 million of 2008 and 2012 have not given this time around, or they have given to as a result of Citizens United, they've given to 527s that are more directed at the Senate races or the congressional races. So the RNC has had to find this balance where they can go out and try to raise some of this money, but they can't raise it at the same level that would make those ad buys worth it.
Now, the Virginia offices of Donald Trump today, on Thursday, closed down.
Yeah.
He shut down all of his offices in Virginia. That tells you what? Is it ceding the state?
It's probably ceding the state. In many respects, there were recent reports of trouble with a lot of the leadership in Virginia. So I think he's probably just going to sort of pile drive his way through the state and hope that a base vote turns out to some degree.
Okay, you look at these national polls, and then I'm running out of time, but I'll get this fast.
Right.
When you look at the LA tracking poll, they see this now as a tie. The Rasmussen reports has Trump up 2 points, but Bloomberg has him down by 9.
Right.
Your thoughts, where are we, and what in your gut are you feeling?
I think right now this is Hillary Clinton's probably up comfortably with about 6 or 7 points. Donald Trump, coming off of this week, we'll have to take a look and see how this all settles in with voters. But I think if you average out the nationals, you look at what's happening on the ground, he's about 7 down, still within striking distance of making this a competitive race in the last 25 days of the campaign.
Oh, amazing. We'll keep our eyes on
Thank
it.
you, my
Michael
friend.
Steele, thank
Always
you
a
for
pleasure.
being here. When we return, Catholics are so confused as they go to the ballot box. Archbishop Joseph NAUMANN will join us to discuss the moral responsibility Catholics have and offer a sort of voter's guide. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
My fellow bishops and I would like to take this opportunity to talk to you about the duties of faithful citizenship in an election year. Just as living a Christian life involves much more than going to church on Sunday, so responsible citizenship requires more than simply voting on election day.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. That was Archbishop Joseph NAUMANN, along with his brother bishops in Kansas, reflecting on the responsibility of the Catholic voter this election season. To give us a voter's guide of sorts and his reflections on the non-negotiable binding moral issues facing Catholics across the country and all people of faith, would you welcome from the Archdiocese of Kansas City, Archbishop Joseph NAUMANN. Thank you for being
Raymond.
here. Delighted to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
I want to bring something to your attention and to the attention of our viewers. The Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith years ago wrote this: a well-formed Christian conscience does not permit one to vote for a political program or for an individual law that contradicts the fundamental contents of faith and morals. We're going to get into some of those contents.
Yes.
What does a well-formed conscience mean?
Well, it means that it's not simply doing what you just intuitively think is good, but it means acquainting yourself with the teachings of the Church, praying over the issues, knowing what issues really hold moral weight, and also the priority that issues have. The Church is concerned about a wide range of issues that have a moral dimension, but there's some of which take a higher priority because of their very nature.
Pope Benedict once wrote that not all moral issues have the same moral weight. I mean, we often hear people say, look, I'm looking for a candidate, what they say on immigration and the environment and poverty. Do those issues occupy the same moral plane and hierarchy as issues of life, issues of marriage?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say they're very important issues, and they're ones that every Catholic has to be concerned about. Sure. I think where the difference comes in is you can be concerned about economic poverty, but you can have Catholics can have a wide variety of approaches. How do we solve that? Or on the immigration, we have certain principles that we apply, but again, there's some latitude. But when you get into some of these fundamental moral issues like life, it's not possible, for instance, to support legalized abortion and be a faithful Catholic.
Under any circumstances?
Yes, I mean, the Pope John Paul in his encyclical talked about you can vote for imperfect legislation as a legislator sometimes if that's going to improve the situation, the state of things.
Right.
But it has to be clear that ultimately you're committed to trying to protect all human life, and though we might vote for something that's imperfect at a given moment.
The voter has an obligation separate from that because they're voting for the candidate themselves rather than
Right. So the voter's choice is more complex because they have to weigh the issues and the character of the candidates as well.
Now, there are these so-called non-negotiable issues in the Catholic mind, in the Catholic hierarchy. You outlined some of these in your video, and I want to run through them. Abortion, which you've just mentioned, the life issue would be at the top. I want to compare the candidates' positions as well. As you see on the full screen, Hillary Clinton supports abortion on demand up until the moment of birth, the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, which forbids federal funding of abortion. She supports the funding of Planned Parenthood, and she has promised to appoint judges who will uphold Roe versus Wade. Donald Trump claims to be pro-life, with an exception for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. He supports the Hyde Amendment. He would defund Planned Parenthood, and he has promised to appoint judges who are strict constitutionalists in the mode of Justice Scalia. Now, does opposition to the death penalty, let's say, cancel out a candidate who supports abortion?
Yeah, again, I think there's some nuances. It's obviously a life issue, and it goes back to our belief that every human life, no matter what heinous crime we might have committed, remains sacred. And if there is a way of protecting society without using capital punishment, which we think in
the church encourages it and always has.
Yeah, this day and age. However, I think there is a difference, even though they're related and they spring from the same moral root of our teaching. When you're talking about innocent human life, life that's never done anything evil but is being killed because of the purposes or the desires of the individuals perpetrating the killing, that's a different moral issue, different weight. And I think numbers aren't everything, but when you're talking about over 1 million of these children aborted every year, 60 million over the course since 1973, just the magnitude of that evil is incredible. So yeah, I think you have to weigh those out as, I think the abortion issue obviously has to have the highest priority that we have. It's not to discount capital punishment and the obligation, I think, as recent popes have called us to work for a society that respects human life, even in these areas. And I think on capital punishment, our concern is that by resorting to it, it really demeans the culture itself. So the Texas bishops, for instance, just came out with a very strong statement on it. But
even though the church still, there's permission for the state to coldly and clinically, not in revenge, to impart the death penalty, but that window morally seems to be closing, but it hasn't closed entirely.
Yeah, and I think historically, the church obviously has, at different points in our history,
made use of the death penalty itself.
Right.
I mean, back in the day.
Yeah. So it's different, but I think in our prism now, with what we understand now in the context of our culture now, we don't see any reason that it can be used. But again, I think when you're looking at, if you have a candidate that differs on that issue as opposed to abortion, again, I think a Catholic voter has to think about the innocence of the life that's involved, as well as the sheer numbers that are being affected by the public policy.
And then there's this issue, the issue of euthanasia, which we see physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia personally. Hillary Clinton favors assisted suicide. She believes the state should make that decision. Donald Trump supports the GOP platform, which insists on a ban on euthanasia and assisted suicide. This is becoming a bigger and bigger life issue, particularly on the ballots in many states. Do you see voters sort of wrestling with this? Because in the wider culture, we see people saying, this is a merciful act. This is an act of mercy. People are suffering.
Yeah. Well, again, it shows a misplaced compassion and mercy. And we have some history, both in Europe and now in some of our own states where this has happened. And we know that there that people are steered towards this decision, it becomes a sense that it's almost a responsibility to get out of the way. And so it's a misguided compassion, I think, that leads people to support this. So yes, we think that's a fundamental life issue as well.
Two other quick non-negotiables that we want to work through here. Cloning and embryonic stem cell research. Hillary Clinton is in favor of lifting the ban on embryonic stem cell research. Donald Trump supports the GOP platform on cloning and embryonic research, which would demand a ban. And then there's the fourth non-negotiable, same-sex marriage. Hillary Clinton supports marriage equality and the LGBT rights. Donald Trump opposes gay marriage and would support the reversal of the Supreme Court ruling legalizing gay marriage. Your thoughts on those two issues?
Well, I think marriage is, again, a very fundamental issue in our culture and society today, and everything really depends on the family. And marriage is, the foundation of the family is marriage. And so if we're confused about the very nature of marriage, it's very, very troubling as a culture, and it's very hurtful to marriage. We need public policies that are really building up marriage and supporting family life, not further confusing what marriage is really about. But you know, again, the church has compassion for those that have same-sex attraction, but that compassion, we don't respond compassionately by misleading people into thinking this can be an acceptable behavior. We believe it, you know, very clearly. It's not for their good either. So I think our public policies, they permit certain things to happen, but they also teach as a culture what's acceptable and what's not. So yes, this would be another, you know, I think a very, very critical moral issue that a Catholic would have to weigh in selecting the person that they vote for.
There is a lot of confusion out there, Archbishop. I'm sure you see it in letters, you hear it from your own flock, where people look at these two candidates, they see the imperfections and the records of both of them. Some of the evangelicals have recently said this talk of Donald Trump's on Access Hollywood, that this is disqualifying. It demonstrates a lack of morality, and therefore some of them have sort of walked away and washed their hands. Others, Catholics and otherwise, say, look, we've got to focus on these issues. The failings of one man or one woman have to be set aside because everybody's got failings. Your take on this?
Well, I mean, I think there's something fundamentally broken in our system where these are the two candidates that we're presented with. And I was in Europe for World Youth Day, and several Europeans said, are these the best people that America can present for leadership? So I think we all have to look at that. How did we get to this place, and how did we get with this being our only choices? That said, you know, I think we have to make a look at the issues and how candidates stand on the issues. And I think, you know, we're presented with two candidates that both have deep moral flaws. And I suppose, as you say, we all have moral flaws. But I think it is unsettling to see that these are the two possibilities that we're with. In the end, you know, I think it's a judgment that each voter has to make after prayer. And again, I think you have to weigh not personalities. We seem to make superficial judgments so often in our culture, and we have to look at what is the impact this candidate. And an important thing, I think, is we're not just electing a particular candidate, we're electing an administration.
An agenda and an administration.
Right. So who that person's going to appoint to be around them and make decisions. We saw that, for instance, with the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
A lot of the problems really were administrative decisions that were made by the
HHS secretary.
Right. And so those people are extremely important and extremely powerful. So who's going to be in those positions? And then, of course, you have the further issue of who are going to be our federal judges.
Yeah, a critical issue. Well, you've said in choosing president, we choose judges. Is that the really first consideration for you when you go into the booth?
I think it has to be a more important consideration today than it was 40 years ago.
Because of the growing power of the judiciary?
Yeah, and because the judiciary has shown this appetite really to take over issues and to, in some ways, I feel we're being ruled no longer by a republic purely, but an oligarchy that has taken some of the most important social issues
off the table and away from the people.
And taken, the people that are supposed to do the legislation have been, that authority has been usurped by the court. And I think this is very, very dangerous. We saw it with life. Now we've seen it with marriage. And in effect, the court doesn't trust the people and their elected representatives to make decisions. And they've, I mean, I don't know any other way to say it, but they've invented rights that nobody can find, I think, in the Constitution.
Your confrere, Bishop Aquila in Denver, has written that Catholics who vote Democratic are selling out Christ and our fathers in faith. He's putting a very sharp point on it because he says this life issue just isn't supported there. Would you join him in that, or do you see other bishops embracing that idea?
Well, I mean, I respect Bishop Aquila, Archbishop Aquila greatly, and but I would say, you know, the church has we've never felt that it's our perspective in the U.S. to tell people to support a particular political party or to support a particular candidate. And this sometimes it aggravates me. People say, well, you're concerned about that because of the IRS, the tax exemption. It goes back to Archbishop Carroll. You know, long before anybody had conceived of the IRS, the church in the United States felt it's not really prudent for the church to stake our credibility on a party or a candidate. So I think that's a wise decision. So I don't think I, as a bishop, or the bishops as a body should be instructing people vote for this candidate, this party.
Even though you are suggesting you should vote for this agenda, this should be on your agenda as you go to vote.
I'm saying you have to, if you're going to form your conscience authentically as a Catholic, these are issues that you cannot ignore, and they have to weigh in heavily on how you make that choice once you go into the voting booth.
Let's talk about religious liberty for a moment. This has become a growing issue over the last few years, particularly vis-a-vis the HHS mandate, demanding that all Catholic institutions, even the Little Sisters of the Poor, have to distribute contraceptives or face horrible fines. Where is this now? How preeminent do you think it is in the mind of Catholics as they go to vote?
I hope it's high, you know, because if the Little Sisters of the Poor, if it can happen to them, it can happen to, and it's not just them, but
it's
also
small businesses, it's non-for-profits.
You know, it was interesting to me in the vice presidential debate, Senator Kaine said, you know, he was afraid of imposing his religious priorities on the nation, when in fact we are having imposed upon groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor to violate their conscience. We're having imposed this idea that if a baker or a florist, because of their moral conscience, chooses not to participate in a same-sex wedding, that they can be fined out of business. So I think we've got it turned around in terms of who's imposing an agenda on the others. And I think we have to be really concerned about religious liberty and conscience rights today. The current administration has tried to narrow those greatly and redefine really what historically we've meant by religious liberty in this country.
Well, Archbishop Lori of Baltimore recently signed a multi-faith letter protesting the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights report. And in that report, they use this phrase, the commissioner there says that religious liberty and religious freedom are nothing more than code words for intolerance. Obviously, not only are the bishops protesting this, but a multi-faith coalition. Where does this go, and what do you see this trend in government? Where do you see it ending?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is extremely troubling, and it's another example of an appointment that the president made. But to say that, I heard people predicting this was going to happen several years ago. They were going to try to tarnish the very language of religious liberty and conscience rights and make that seem like code words for hate. And that's exactly what he said there. And nothing could be farther from the truth. I mean, the religious liberty is our most fundamental right. And if we take it away from one group, it can happen to any group. And I think, and these conscience rights protections are critical, that we can live our faith, not just within the walls of the church, but we can live our faith out in society as well, and we can voice our faith in society.
Well, just as a practical matter, I mean, just if there's no religion involved at all and you step back, these groups, Catholic hospitals, orphanages, the Little Sisters of the Poor caring for the indigent elderly, AIDS clinics that we run in New York City, evangelical outreach in poor communities and distribution of clothing during the winter. These are efforts, part of the social service network that saves the federal government billions of dollars and supports the citizenry. Why would you try to undermine that? In place of what? What replaces it?
Yeah, and I feel there's an agenda here really to marginalize the church, to take her out of these places where...
Because of the moral teaching.
Right, because they object to our moral teaching, and so we see, you know, federal grants being pulled from certain of our providers, even though they'll admit that we do the best care for refugees.
And closest to the people.
Right, and so I think this is, again, a very, very troubling development.
Picking up on that agenda, there was that WikiLeaks dump of emails, and we see Jennifer Palmieri, the communications director for the Clinton campaign, and other activists talking about describing the Catholic Church in terms of backwards, a medieval mentality when it comes to gender relations. Your thoughts on that? How damaging is that, and what do you think it reveals?
Well, I mean, I think it reveals that those individuals, that they have talk about a religious bias and bigotry. And I mean, what's very troubling is that they were calling for a revolution, and that they wanted to help advance what they called a Catholic spring.
Seeds of revolution in the church.
Yeah, so that they are trying, and I think there's a conscious agenda by some to say, we're going to divide the people from the bishops, and they're looking for wedge issues. And so they think they found that in contraception. And it's true, we as bishops, I think we need to form our people better on this issue. But I think it's really, it's unsavory that politicians would be trying to interfere with religion. And I think if it was happening to any other religious group, the outcry would be enormous.
Archbishop NAUMANN, thank you so much for being here. We'll be in touch in the coming days, hopefully after this is all over.
Yeah, well,
thank you. And
glad.
you can watch Archbishop NAUMANN's video, Reflections on the 2016 Election by the Catholic Bishops of Kansas, at his diocesan website. It's archkck.org. archkck.org. Well, that's all the time we have. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at raymondarroyo.com. Be sure to join us next week. We'll analyze the final presidential debate of 2016, and we'll talk about storytelling with Avi, the world-renowned children's author. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.